Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Lockdown Love here on British Muslim TV, broadcasting internationally via Sky Channel 752, Freeview, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. My name is Salim Kassam and I'm your host today and the co-founder of The Muslim Vibe. We've teamed up to bring you Lockdown Love, a special programme part of British Muslim TV's daily Lockdown Live series, as the UK remains under lockdown due to the coronavirus. But one thing that COVID-19 doesn't disturb is love, and our guest today knows all about that. He sparked hundreds of thousands of marriages and subsequently tens of thousands of babies, with no doubt many more being conceived under lockdown. God, I apologise for that line. I'm just reading the script here, guys. Anyways, Adeem Younis is a serial entrepreneur, philanthropist and humanitarian who founded the UK's largest Muslim matrimony app, SingleMuslim.com. Over the past 2 decades, the Wakefield-based entrepreneur has transformed the Muslim matrimony scene, making him the ideal guest for today's show. Without further ado, let me introduce the man himself, Adeem Younis. Adeem, salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Salim, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, really good, thank you.
I'm having a look at the two of us and I look like I've been through about 5 years of lockdown. You're looking relatively fresh.
No, but this is a DIY this morning. So just, you know, the hair is there, is kind of coming out, a little bit of an afro coming out there.
No. You look media ready as always, man. How's everything? How are you finding things in lockdown?
Yeah, I feel blessed. You know, it's a good time to reflect and to think and to kind of like, you know, just take everything in. Alhamdulillah, spending a lot, as you can appreciate, spending a lot more time with family, squeezing some work in here and there as well, and just catching up on the kind of the movie list and the book list from about 5 years ago.
I'm finding it really strange. I think the first few weeks was quite difficult to adapt to just being confined to one place. And I'm sure you're like me. Like, I love being out the house. I love meeting people, and that's what kind of keeps me going in the week. But now it's getting to a point where I'm kind of okay with the routine. I feel, I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? It's very mundane, but at the same time very nice. Like I'm managing. Go on. No,
absolutely. I mean, you look, we're humans. We're creatures of habit. So as soon as that our kind of routine changes, then I guess we kind of like, you're a bit stumbling and what's going on here. But we learn to adapt, don't we? And I think for me as well, like you said, it's that first couple of weeks. But now you've kind of got a bit of a rhythm. Whatever that rhythm is not too distant, not too much traveling in that rhythm. But it's a little bit of a different rhythm. But you know, we kind of adapt.
And so we wanted to talk today about I think Lockdown Love is the name of of this conversation essentially. And I think before we get into kind of love in the time of lockdown and quarantine, it's interesting because everything we're doing now is how do we frame everything around our current situation, which is so bizarre. Like, everything's just flipped on its head like overnight. But I think before that, it's interesting because I've, to be honest, wanted to speak to you on the Muslim Vibe for a long time, just about understanding your background and kind of the origin story of Single Muslim, and then all the work that you've done since then. Because I think for most people, you know, like you're a name in the community. People have heard of Adeem, and Single Muslim is again like the largest or one of the largest Muslim matrimony websites. But I think it's always interesting when I get the opportunity to kind of ask people about a little bit about the background and where it all started, because I know, you know, it hasn't always been high-flying entrepreneurship for you, and there is like a bit of a backstory there. So how did it all start?
Yeah, it's been 20 years now in the making, believe it or not. A lot of white hairs to kind of prove the journey as well. I think back when it started from really was a passion that I had when I was a child for graphic design and for marketing. But I guess it started from me now kind of distilling the journey and trying to understand why I chose a certain path over another. Kind of goes back to when I was 8 years old, and sadly my father passed away. And after my father's passing, my mother took kind of control in terms of the family, and really kind of took a lot of initiative, especially back then, as a not just as a Muslim woman, but as an Asian woman, and just as a woman as well. And she started off her own business. She learned how to drive to drop us off at school. And I guess what was seen that kind of independence and kind of seen a strong character and seen a female who kind of provided everything for us as individuals. I had never felt at that time that we were ever short of anything, even though we had the breadwinner, missing from our lives. Mum provided everything for us, made sure that we had, kind of like clothes same as everybody else, went on the same trips as everybody else, and so on and so forth. And through kind of the early years, and then going into college and kind of working on what I wanted to do, because I wanted to get away from the identity, because I guess my identity at home was of a child who'd lost his father, a yatim, an orphan boy, and everybody that knew me in the community was, whose son are you? They'd say, oh, that's Younis's son. And they say, oh, not that Younis, not the one that's passed away, but not the Younis that's works over there, but the Younis that's passed away. And I guess that was my identity, and I think I wanted to get away from that and detach myself from being somebody who was seen as somebody who's in need, or somebody who has less, or somebody who's kind of maybe poor. And I wanted to create my own identity, and I did that when I went to college, and I kind of like really focused on my passion, which was design and marketing. And IT back then.
Just if I can jump in just very quickly, it's I think that's really interesting what you just mentioned, because often, and like I reflect on people that I know in the community, for example, that have lost a parent, and if you don't know them personally, for example, they're painted with that kind of paintbrush, and that's their kind of identifier. But it's interesting that you then kind of saw that and used that to want to not rebrand yourself, but to show people that you were more than just someone who had lost their father tragically at a young age. Does that make sense?
I guess so. And at that time, honestly, Salim, I guess at that time this is not what I was thinking, and this is not what it was about. It's just now distilling the understanding what it was all about, and I guess what were my drivers, and really kind of like, coming to terms with that. That was probably most likely the case. And I guess I wanted to achieve more and be independent and step away from that stigma and say, look, that's just not me. I am something different to that, and I almost want to try to prove it to people that that's the case. And I found my passion, which was design and marketing, at college. And my tutors, Tony and Ron, back then, they really, really believed in me, and they supported me, and they gave me some really good work experiences. And I thought to myself, I can do this. And I was in an agency in Leeds. And at that agency, when I was going in and working, we did everything, from full design, animation, the whole works. And it was a 2-week work experience. And at the end of the 2-week work experience, they said, Adeem, we've loved having you around, because I guess they got a designer, they got a junior designer, but they also got a good team maker. They also got somebody who was hoovering. They also got somebody who was, photocopying. When they wanted tickets to Leeds United, I'd put my hand up and say, look, I'll jump on the bus and get you the tickets for the Leeds United match this weekend. Don't worry about it, I'll go get you shopping for you. So, I guess that was from being at home and mum giving you a good backhand slap saying, you will do this and you will do that. So it's almost like, this is just what it's supposed to be. I'm here to help you guys, and I'll do everything holistically. And I went on to a 6 months work experience with the agency, and it taught me no end. And from my studies at college, my studies at university, couldn't compete with the 6 months, one day a week that I had at the agency. And I thought to myself, I can do this. If these guys can do this in their kind of like, penthouse offices in Leeds, I can do this. All I needed is an office. And I was working at a pizza shop, and I found that it had a massive upstairs, and 50% of it wasn't being used. So I said to the chap at the pizza shop, I said, I want to set up an office upstairs. What do I do? And he says, you can have the office upstairs if you do me a couple of extra shifts, and if you turn on the oven at 3 o'clock before the team come in and whatnot. So we did a bit of a deal. There was no money exchange, and that was the office on top of the pizza shop. And I set up a design business called Go Web Print, and that was kind of my design agency. That was a design agency that I thought, we're gonna conquer the world from here. I don't know how I didn't know how I was gonna do it, but that was a start. I remember looking out of the office window and saying to the guys, we only need to be able to tell our message to these individuals outside. How do we tell the world outside, the traffic that's going past, the people that are walking past, that we're here? And I guess that's where the kind of the marketing and the kind of focus on turning on, as I used to call it, turning on the lights, because it's just dark. How do you turn on the lights so people can see you? And at that time, there was a whole different challenge. So I was having this challenge at the office in terms of how to create this business and how to get this business off the ground. And when I'd go home, my mum had a whole separate challenge for me. She was like, okay, but the son, we need to get you married. And I was like, oh dear, I'm not ready for this. All my life, my mum's been saying to me, you're not allowed to have a girlfriend. You're not allowed to be caught, get caught, being with girls or be seen with girls. And now mum's saying, I need to get married. And she's not just telling me to get married. She's saying, look, have you got somebody? And I'm like, no, I haven't got anybody. What do you expect from me, Mum? Do you want me to find somebody? You've been telling me all my life to be stay away from girls. Absolutely. And now you're saying, have you got somebody? Anyway, so she said, okay, you've got till the summertime to find somebody, and if you can't find anybody until the summer, then we're going to go to Pakistan. And your uncle's got a lovely daughter, and she's really nice, and she'll cook for you, she'll clean, she'll look after everything, and she'll look after me as well. And I'm like, this is the girl that I've been calling sister all my life. Now my mum wants me to get married to her. So I'm like, oh my God, what do we do? Anyway, so we were in that digital space. At that time, it was an emerging digital space. And I thought just the obvious thing to do was kind of like have a portal, have a platform, have a website that was helping people get married, because it's a problem of a whole generation, not just my challenge, but I knew a lot of friends, I knew colleagues, I knew people at the office, people at university at the time. They were all having this similar kind of challenges. So I thought it's just the obvious first thing to do, and it was hard to begin with, because nobody got it, nobody really understood. At that time, we're a very laggard community anyway, and everything happens and we kind of wake up and like, whoa, what's going on here? So anyway, we kind of come on at a later stage, and then I think early on we started doing a lot of what we know now as a kind of guerrilla marketing. So I don't know if you remember the anti-war demonstration in 2003. We were there, Million Man March.
Were they sponsored by SingleMuslim.com?
We were trying to get it sponsored by Single Muslim, but we couldn't afford it. So we had these little flyers, and there was a whole kind of million man marching, and there was a lot of Muslim pockets of individuals there as well. And we were handing out these flyers saying, make love, not war, make love, not war. by the time they got the flyer, but they looked at the flyer, they were like, and then we'd be off. We'd be having to do some flyers to somebody else. And then we had.
Can I just jump in and say I love a good hustle story, and everything you've told me from the beginning of your kind of internship all the way up until now, it's just pure hustle. And I think the thing is, the experience that I've had in kind of business the last few years is that younger people today lack this spirit. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of people, even with the Muslim Vibe as an example, people are like, oh, the Muslim Vibe is great. Like, how did you start it? And you can tell everyone exactly how to do something, but the one thing that you can't give them is that drive.
Yeah.
And like, for example, those going to Leeds to pick up tickets and things like that. Like, this is such small stuff, but the fact that it's made it to your story 20 years later, is you appreciate that it's the foundations and the building blocks of what got you to kind of where you are today, right? And I think people, they look at the success and the size of platforms, and they don't fully get that there's so much that goes into it to get you to that place. And it's like I don't know what animal, I can't remember what the example is they give, but it's like an animal swimming on the surface, and it looks, I think it's a swan, it looks really elegant, but the legs are going crazy underneath, right? And all of those like 18, 19 years up until this point is all of that. And what people say at the end is like, oh yeah, Single Muslim celebrating its 20th anniversary, and that's it, right?
Alhamdulillah. No, and it's so true, and you see it blatantly with, we've got interns and so on and so forth that come to the office now, and the attitude is so different. I'm thinking to myself, what was my attitude back then? My attitude was yes, G, whatever it might be, 3 bags full. So whatever you need, I'll go over and above, because you want to immerse yourself and you want to prove yourself and you want to understand and you want to learn, you want to absorb everything. We had back then. I guess we had the impetus, and the next one I remember as well, kind of like taking me down memory lane now, Salim. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf came to Bradford, and he came to Bradford, and this is, I guess, where it started for me in terms of the success. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf came to Bradford. I heard very late on. Again, I was there with my box of flyers with some friends. Come on, guys, you're coming along. Outside the masjid, handing these flyers out. and this one big giant guy walked over to my friend and says, whose is this website? My friend looked at him, and then he looked over to me, and I thought, we're going to get a beating here, because this guy doesn't look friendly at all. So anyway, I walked over to him. I was in this embrace position. I says, brother, it's me. How can I help? And he looked at me and gave me a big smile, and then he gave me this big hug. And he goes, can you remember I was at so-and-so university and you came with the flyers? And I'm looking up at this guy thinking, what? And he's like, yeah, I took your flyer and I went online and I met somebody and now we're married. I'm so happy and it's because of you. And I'm like, oh my God, I had goosebumps on my back and I was like, wow. And I guess for me, that was it. I was just pumped then and I was just so kind of hyped and I was like, let's go. We need to do this. And that was the first success story that I'd heard about. And even today, we hear about success stories every single day. We've had success stories today, and the same, that feeling of helping people, uniting people, getting people together, and getting people, and inshallah, that'll be their eternal partner, that'll be the person that they'll be in Jannah with, and having children and offspring from that is just the most beautiful feeling in the world.
It's incredible, and I think when you have those anecdotal stories, sometimes it means so much more than the kind of numbers. You know what I mean? When you see like users on a website, so even with the Muslim Vibe, we see huge numbers coming through and visiting our website. But actually, it's when you speak to someone who you've never met before, who's like, "Oh my God, I listened to that podcast or I watched that video. It was incredible." And you just think, wow, like this is actually impacting people. And I mean, that's so small in comparison to like helping someone get married.
No.
And completing half their deen, essentially, right? So I can't even begin to imagine. But it's kind of crazy.
It's crazy, and all on top of a pizza shop in Wakefield. Who'd have thought? You know what I mean? And now we've got 3 million members and hundreds of thousands of individuals getting married and children. I get if they're looking at a dawah project, this is the biggest dawah project that we probably got in the West. So in terms of and alhamdulillah, I just feel so blessed because the technology and the team behind it. Most of the guys that have been with me for majority of the journey as well. Close to 2 decades, so it's been amazing. It's been amazing, alhamdulillah. And
sorry, go on.
Yeah, sorry, Salim. We've seen a lot of changes. We've seen a huge amount of changes because in the old days it was the desktop. So this is what your internet was. You got to go on and and it's dial up from that kind of to tablets, and now everything's.
And then your family member picks up the phone, and then it suddenly gets cut. And thing is, man, a lot of people listening to this won't even remember those days. It's crazy.
I remember when I don't know if you can remember, but photographs used to be haram. Can you remember when photographs used to be haram? Like, you're not allowed a photograph. The only photograph you're allowed is your passport photograph.
They still are, bro. They still are. What are you talking about?
Apart from moving images.
We've been through a lot. The thing is, like, the digital age has just changed so much. And I think even, like, the process of meeting someone online for the purpose of marriage, like once upon a time, that was a sacred bond between one auntie and another auntie that would match up every single eligible bachelor in their kind of network. But now it's become a thing that people are kind of finding their own path. They're meeting people their own way, even in unconventional, untraditional ways. But what's interesting, I find, is that something like singlemuslim.com has almost become like a legacy brand in the online or in the matrimony space. Do you know what I mean?
Alhamdulillah. I mean,
like it once was a taboo.
We still empower those aunties. Those aunties are like aunties on steroids if they've got access to single Muslim.
But it's I don't know, man. I think like we've just come such a long way, and looking at single Muslim and where it's at today, it's one of those things where meeting someone online is no longer taboo, and I think that's such a good thing. And I still, in my personal life, I still kind of, whenever anyone tries to say or scoff at the thought of meeting someone online, I'll always, like, people are like, oh, I would never kind of resort to that. And I'd always say, well, why the hell not? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? But I'm seeing that attitude less and less. And people are starting to appreciate that there's nothing wrong with meeting people online. And actually, it's a very healthy place to do that if done appropriately and everything else. But yeah, I mean, what's the reaction been like for you, very briefly?
No, so I mean, in the early days there was a lot of that, but I think in the early days it was a case of people didn't know, even our community sadly didn't even know what the internet was. That was what we were up against. And I remember one of my community aunties, talking about anecdotes, one of my community aunties, she invited me to the house and she says, Adeem, what do you think you're doing? This is not how marriage works. This is not how we do things, and you need to go away, and you need to stop messing with our traditions. And then, a couple of months down the line, she invited me to her house and made biscuits and tea and fruit salad and everything. And she says, Adeem, your cousin, my kind of community cousin, he's looking for a wife and we can't find him somebody. Can you find him somebody from that machine? Can you help him from that machine of yours? my uncle worked at the factory, so she's assuming there's a machine.
I mean, it's amazing the way the attitudes have kind of changed, and I think what we want to explore in the kind of second half of our conversation is looking at I think exploring a little bit more about how the digital age has essentially changed, I think, the landscape of this, but then also chucking in coronavirus and discussing a little bit more about where, well, I guess how it's affected you personally, but then also, what you're seeing in terms of online, because I believe numbers have gone up in terms of people visiting the website and everything else. And I think it's fascinating to think that, but we're gonna have a very short break very soon, and then we'll kind of come back and discuss a little bit more, if that's all right with you.
Perfect.
So salam and welcome back to Lockdown Love, a special edition of British Muslim TV's Lockdown Live in association with the Muslim Vibe. I'm today talking to Adeem Younis from singlemuslim.com, and we're talking about, well, Lockdown Love essentially. Adeem, so we were talking earlier about your kind of background, how Single Muslim came to be, and I think the main crux of the conversation I wanted to center around lockdown and what that's done for singlemuslim.com. So firstly, my thinking is that because people are sat at home, they're going to be lonely, they're going to log on to singlemuslim.com and try and find a spouse. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's no better time for individuals who are single to actually feel how single they are, because you sat at home with mum and dad or siblings, and it's like there's no distraction of work or very little distraction. You can pretend to be working all you want, but you're not at work. There's no kind of like social influences, gym and whatever. And you're at home and you're thinking, actually, you know what? I'm really single, and I don't want to be spending the rest of my life with mum and dad. What do I do? How do I get married? If there's another lockdown, how do I make sure that I'm with my partner, my husband or wife?
It is. I mean, it's definitely, I think especially the first few weeks of all of this, for me personally, was a very kind of introspective time, because what happens is you obviously strip back a lot of the noise in your life. And for a lot of people as well, work, for example, they've been furloughed or they're working from home or whatever. So there's a lot of time they have back in their day. And suddenly they're, as you say, assessing things. But I think an interesting thing is that you guys have seen a rise in female users particularly.
Yeah, I mean, without sounding too smug, because I think the seriousness of it is that a lot of people are finding a hardship at this time. People are being furloughed. People don't know what the future is going to hold. But as an online business and as a trend within the online space, businesses are really doing very, very well. And as part of that, we've seen a 25% increase in usage. So we have thousands of people joining on a regular basis.
Wow, as much as 25%.
25%, absolutely. And there's a recent survey saying that up to 80%, over 80% of individuals who are single have now started to search to find love online. So 25% is what we've seen in terms of activity on the website. But within that, which is very, very interesting, is 60% are females. And I think there's more females than males because it's seen as a very, very safe space. So females traditionally aren't as active online as males, and that's not just in the Muslim space, but that's in the mainstream space as well. But now with the lockdown, there's more females that are active than their kind of counterparts, and I think again it's because of the time and the space, and they're kind of like maybe just thinking, okay, we just need to. Females are generally without sounding kind of genderist on this, females are generally more serious anyway, and it's kind of reflective of that, I guess, on the online space.
And in terms of on the platform, I think things like security are always an issue, and privacy and whatever else. What kind of measures do you have in place for that? Because I think that's always a question that people have about these platforms, like with regards to inappropriate language and anything else. How is that all kind of monitored, whilst maintaining people's privacy, if that makes sense?
I think about 70% of the work that we do is in terms of policing the website, making sure the profiles are genuine. All the profiles that we have are moderated by a human. The images, the profile content, and then there's all the reporting that we get. So we've put in more measures, more individuals over the last few weeks, as we've seen the increase in traffic, and as we've seen an increase in the usability in terms of policing the website. And it's quite funny because there's a lot of people that are kind of frustrated. They're inside the messaging, and the contact and the communication isn't always the most halal, but we're ensuring that it stays as a kind of a successful and a fruitful platform for people who are serious and focused on marriage. And I'd go as far as saying that inshallah, when my daughter's of the age where she's looking for marriage, I'd be happy for my own daughter to go on to Single Muslim and find a partner for herself.
Inshallah. And with regards, I mean, you mentioned something interesting just now about, like, obviously given the situation that people are in, there is that kind of agitation and that frustration within them, and so often they're kind of turning online and whatever else. But it sounds like a weird question, but is it a good time to actually be doing that when you're just very frustrated and you've got, you can't go to the gym, you haven't got any outlets, you can't play any sports, whatever it might be? Is the solution to kind of turn online? What happens if when the lockdown is lifted, you're like, I'm talking to this guy, I don't actually want to be in a relationship, I've got my life back, so to speak? Are people turning to love because they're lonely and bored? And is that like a good enough reason to?
I think it's a very, very good question. I think it affects different people in different ways, and I think taking away that natural environment is going to cause some complexities. But at the same time, from our experience on the website, what it's done is it's actually made for more meaningful relationships. Because what we found is that when you are in that early phase where you're getting to know somebody, you're getting to know the family, there's going to be a lot of distractions. So you might be distracted by saying, oh wow, he took me to this really fancy restaurant and it was really posh, or we went out to see this and we went out to see that, and her dad thinks this and her mum thinks this. Well, actually, does it really matter? Does all that really matter? What actually matters is the two of you and how the two of you are getting on with each other. And I guess also, people are wanting payoffs in a relationship. What is that payoff? So maybe you're doing something, then he does something for you, you do something for him, and it's maybe exchanging gifts or going to nice places, or whatever that might be. But in this time where there isn't that distraction, or you're not able to do that whatsoever, you can really get to understand somebody and see what deep connections there are there, and have that time to reflect. Yeah.
That's actually, I think that's really interesting, because I didn't think whenever I talk about marriage and this kind of topic on the podcast, I always reflect back on my own experience.
Of course,
like when I met my wife and having to go on, like, take her out to cafes and restaurants, and I was a student at the time, and we were both broke. So I remember, like, my most successful dates were when we would go to, like, a museum, and I'd conveniently also leave my wallet at home, so then she would have to buy the coffee. She won't be happy hearing this back. I don't think she knows about that time. But it's interesting, because now you're talking about basically stripping out all of those the noise, essentially. Like when we talk about everything, we've lost all the noise. Similarly, in getting to know someone, it's just like very, but it can also be a bit intimidating, because there's no longer like a movie or a place to distract. It's just you and the other person, and you're just talking, because you can't meet. You're just having like a conversation.
And I think it's more than that, because you're having a conversation, but you're getting to know somebody, and you're really getting to know them without kind of, you know, going and like you said, distracting with other things. But also, you know, you can have these quiz apps, and you can, you know, gamification, where you can get to know somebody and their behavior and what they're like and their temperament's like and their patience is like, and maybe, you know, there's so many things that you can do. And just because we can't physically meet doesn't mean that you can't, you know, virtually be in their space. You can have FaceTime open, you can be cooking, you can be cleaning, you can be doing a million one things, and you know, in your own space, and they can get to know you and whatnot.
Do you think it's possible to fall in love online?
We have it every single day. Absolutely. Yeah.
But like but I mean without meeting someone, because like again, going back to my own experience, my wife hates this when I do this, and I always say I'm going to stop, but I keep doing it. So I apologize, Alham, if you do hear this. Anyways, so look, when we met, so first she was abroad at the time, so we were like exchanging emails or whatever. I might have even talked about this particular incident, but I was waiting to kind of meet her face to face to see if there was like a genuine spark between us, because we were compatible in terms of like same interests and everything else, but there needs to be that, like, you know when you meet a friend and you just vibe with someone. Like I believe that I needed that with whoever my potential wife was going to be, and alhamdulillah, when I met my wife face to face, there was that spark, and we got on really well, and that was it. That what kind of cemented it. But I don't personally, I don't believe it would have been possible to entirely kind of fall in love and decide on marrying her without meeting face to face. But do you believe it's possible to go the whole way without actually having a face to face encounter?
I think, you know, the next step would be doing a virtual nikah, wouldn't it? And just saying Kabul, 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 and just doing the whole thing online. That's it. I think maybe that was going a step too far.
Yeah.
But you know, I think you can get to know somebody. You can get to know somebody very, very well online, and you can get to know somebody for the real reasons, and keeping it halal. You know, there's no other way you're gonna keep it strictly halal. And from the experience that we've had, there's a lot of parents that have been involved as well. So, you know, you think that with single Muslim, it's two individuals that are just kind of like catching up online and messaging. But in the kind of virtual space as well, now you've got mums that are involved, dads that are poking up and saying, "Hey, Salam, how are you doing?" And I think everything but that kind of, as you call it, that vibing, you know, what does it feel to be in the space with that person, and how do you kind of what's the ambience of that person, what's the temperature of that person, how that feels. Everything apart from that, you can do virtually, of course. And I think, you know, in terms of the quality online and the preferences and all the rest of it, that the website takes care of in terms of the safety and the rest of it. And I think what the users need to do really is, you know, kind of understand what the other person is. And a lot of the times, what I think is, or how I feel is, you know, when we say, oh, I'm looking for somebody who's, you know, funny, I'm looking for somebody who's got a good sense of humor, I'm looking for somebody who's loyal, they're all very, very surface level words. What we need to really understand is that the depth behind those individuals and what they mean. And I think when we get into know somebody, and you maybe almost like role playing in terms of what would you do if this happened, what would you do if that happened? And you can do that by having a kind of like a quiz online or a game online, and you can see somebody's temperament, you can see how somebody behaves, reacts. Maybe you can kind of understand their background a little bit more as well. And I feel in the lockdown environment, there's that focus on things that are more meaningful, and we become more meaningful because, again, with the distraction comes a lot of, like, you know, relationship distractions as well. Because you got one more message comes from so and so, another message comes from so and so, another message comes from so and so. You've just got off a call with so and so, and it's just like, where does it all start? So you're at home, you're in the comfort of your own home. You feel more relaxed, and I think people have less inhibitions as well when they're in that, because they feel safe. So they're on the website. They feel safe in the website space. They feel safe in the virtual space. They feel safe because they're in their own home, and I guess they can be themselves more. So it's really about kind of, if you are yourself more, you're going to attract a person who's kind of genuine with you as well.
I think it's really interesting, and like because I was introduced to my wife from a friend, I never went through the kind of online route. I can only ever kind of just imagine the process and the experience. And obviously there is always that excitement when it comes to kind of speaking to someone for the first time and getting to know them and whatever else. But as you say, things like, I think the game side of things and doing quizzes, like there's a new app that all the kids are using. I say this because I still don't fully know how to use it, which is House Party. And so like my cousins were on it the other day, and we played like a trivia game. It's amazing because we've got to a stage technologically where you can actually be video calling someone and playing a game on the same app at the same time. And you know what I mean? Like a real time response type thing. Whereas back in the day, the technology was BlackBerry Messenger. That's as advanced as things were. I remember when maps weren't, really doable through the mobile phone. And so, I'm not that old. That's more, that's more your kind of territory. But it's interesting when you kind of look at, it's crazy because I always think about just how far we've come and like how much possibility there is now with the internet and how it just constantly is advancing and improving and just making things so much kind of easier. So in a weird way, and this is the other thing as well, that like essentially now we're talking about long distance relationships, and that long distance relationship can be 5,000 miles or it can be 15-20 minutes down the road, right? Given the lockdown that we're currently in, it doesn't matter how far along in a conversation you are with someone. It doesn't matter what your relationship status is. If you're not married, if you're not living in the same house, you legally cannot see them, which is extremely difficult, I can imagine, for people. But it's forced us all into a state of having long distance relationships. Well, I guess firstly, do you think it's healthy? Because I think long distance relationships in themselves, and again, I'd love your thoughts on this, but I feel like long distance relationships as it is are difficult, coronavirus aside. So I think it's a lot easier to have someone in your local area or someone that's not too far that you can see every now and then, because for me, the lack of physically seeing each other and being around each other is not healthy, right? But then now everyone's in that position. How do we navigate? Because so number one, how do you navigate a long distance relationship anyway? But right now, how should people be navigating? And is it healthy to kind of consider getting into a long distance relationship at a time of a crisis?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very. It's a very, very interesting question, because the thing that comes to mind is being present, and I think a lot of the times, when you're not having a long distance relationship, when you're having somebody that's living down the road from yourself, or even when you are now married and you're in the same home together, you're in the same place, how present are you in that space? And I guess for me, having a long distance relationship, whether you're a mile down the road or 10,000 miles away, whatever you might be, it's about being present. And if you can wake up in the morning and you're saying, hi, assalamu alaikum, I've woke up, I've missed Fajr or something of that nature, and then you're like, I'm going to work, I'm at work, I'm having a break. If you can just keep tapping in and kind of being present in your relationship, I get you, and I'm behind you 100% that, being there physically and being kind of like, in the same house is makes it a lot easier. But even when people are in the same house, I mean, we're now, at the time of lockdown, sadly, there's a lot of news reports that we're hearing from China and from Italy in terms of the domestic violence and the divorce rate, skyrocketing, because people have just actually like been locked in together and thinking, oh my God, I've just woken up with this person. I'm married to, I don't even know who I'm married to, because we've never had this much time together. And do I really know this person that I'm living with? And I didn't really recognize this. And being kind of in that space, being in a confined space with somebody and having all these uncertainties in life is gonna knock the best of relationships. But if those relationships have not got solid grounding, it's gonna be clearly harmful. So for me, long distance relationships, are easy. It's just about the intention of the individuals, and it's also, I guess, about how much they want it.
So one of the things that I find interesting is that I know people, for example, that are very effective communicators face to face, but don't like talking on WhatsApp or don't like phone calls even. And that's my concern with all of this. That like I feel like you're probably disadvantaging some people in their pursuit of a spouse because they're not as able to, for example, write nice emails as someone who can, like, you know, speak quite comfortably to someone from the opposite sex or whatever. But how should people approach this? And I think that for me, again, I'm thinking, given everything that we're going through, we don't know, there's a lot of uncertainty. It's natural that people start reassessing their life, and it's natural, or it's understandable that your numbers have gone up by 25%. But then how do you believe people should proceed? Like, should people be taking it slow, or should it just be, yalla, let's go, let's do this, let's find an imam that will do it online, let's get married, and then we'll figure out the rest later?
No, you should always take it slow. Always take it slow. Always be considered. Always ask for individuals' references, who the mahrams are, who the individuals are. If whether you're a male or a female, go in and get reference from the community. And without those references, you shouldn't take steps forward. Make kind of a mature assessment of the situation. Because remember, and again, it's not just in religiously, but culturally as well. And most of us are from kind of the Asian subcontinent and the cultures that we live in as well. Even without that, we're not getting married. It's not just two individuals that are getting married. It's actually two families and two kind of extended communities that are coming together. So it's very, very important that you go into this in a mature way. So in terms of that kind of gunshot approach, quick, let's get married. And I guess that's where like the kind of saying falling in love happens. And as Muslims, we're not really necessarily falling in love, or maybe we are falling because we can't help ourselves, but we have to fall in love for the person for the right reasons, for the kind of eternal reasons, for the hereafter, for the kind of like putting our faith at the forefront. And I guess for me, everybody that's on Single Muslim, they could be on any kind of marriage platform, dating platform that they choose to be on, but because they're on Single Muslim, why? Because they're looking for somebody of the same Muslim faith group. They're looking for somebody who they can grow old with. And at the bottom of, deep down to their core, is because they're a Muslim, and that's their value, that's their belief, and they want to grow old with a Muslim. They want to have children in a Muslim household. They want to have children in a Muslim environment, and that's very, very important to them.
I think the another key area that needs discussing and exploring as well is with everything that's happening, the financial implications of it. And I think it kind of broadens out a little bit beyond that, because on the one hand, people are now going to be worried, with a lot of people, as we've discussed earlier, being laid off, being furloughed, even people who are self-employed. We don't know how businesses are going to bounce back. And what this, what the outcome is going to be from all of this. But I've always thought that, to an extent, I mean, look, I personally believe that we shouldn't let sort of money, for example, be a factor in us deciding whether we want to get married or not. And it's like, if we don't have the money, well, let's go with it and see what happens, and Allah will provide, essentially, right? But at the same time, there is an element of needing to be smart and understanding the climate and everything that's kind of happening. I mean, where do you stand on that? Because marriage is a big deal. It's a burden, but like a blessing of a burden, in terms of like being responsible for another human being. But then also, like, there are financial implications if you think about kids as well. That's not cheap either. But we believe that Allah will provide for us. Where do you stand on that with regards to kind of thinking about the material side when it comes to marriage, especially in light of everything that's happening right now?
I'm a strong believer that Allah will provide, and the blessings will come. And I know from my own experience as well, and the kind of like the background that I shared, alhamdulillah, from having nothing, from having a lot, not really kind of materially having nothing, to alhamdulillah having everything and more than I could ever use in my life, alhamdulillah, and got 4 children of my own, and they bring their own blessings as well. And the old saying, we plan, they plan, Allah plans. Allah is the best of planner, and that's actually a Quranic verse. Allah is the best of planner, and we need to just accept that as well. And as Muslims, we have that belief. We're always confident that Allah will, even sometimes we can't see the good, in what we're doing. But another amazing project that I'm involved in and that I founded was Penny Peel, and I strongly believe that Penny Peel is an international charity, and that charity was only set up, and I only founded that charity, I believe, because of my experiences as a child being an orphan, and now my kind of desire, my passion in wanting to help other orphans. And we've raised nearly £100 million internationally for orphans in kind of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, water well projects. And that now I'm looking at that, I'm thinking to myself, as a child when my father passed away, it's like, oh my God, that's the worst thing that could happen. But now being able to, that then impacting me and me wanting to go into setting something like of that kind up and helping so many people, creating so many jobs in the UK, but also alleviating poverty from millions and millions around the world, was only a direct impact of my childhood experiences. And if I'd not had that experience, that would have never happened. So I'm a kind of a living example of that, and I strongly believe that we should do as much as we can, but everything else we should just leave in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just say, look, Allah, I'm doing my best. This is what I've planned. This is what I want to achieve. This is my intention, and then just go for a bit of a free fall and let destiny take its shape. Yeah,
it's a poetic approach. But I feel like no. I mean that in a good way, genuinely. But like, I feel like because of the experiences that you had very early on in life, and you saw the way that Allah essentially took you on this journey, it was, you were able to have a bit more kind of faith and belief as a result. Do you know what I mean? Whereas for people that have never been mindful of that in their own heads, suddenly to them be like, all right, I'm just going to jump in and see what happens is not the easiest thing, right?
People can't, and most people can't comprehend it. No, I love change. I've always had change in my life. And some of the work colleagues are like, Adeem, you're just doing change for change's sake now, are you? Because you're bored. And I'm like, yeah, but there's only one thing, for me, there's only one thing in life guaranteed, and that's change. Even death, paying tax. Part of that change is the wealthier you get is that the more taxes you got to pay. Everything changes in life. Everything changes in life. And if you embrace change, I think you're going to have a better life. And we know now with lockdown, wow, everything has changed globally and never be back to what it was before.
I think it's been like a very stark reminder of just how out of control we are as human beings. Like, we think we know everything, and like in literally a second, everything changed. And I think that's the crazy thing about this whole lockdown. Like it's impacted every single human being in this country, pretty much in the world, I would say, on such a catastrophic level. But just before we kind of have some reflecting thoughts on coronavirus and all of that, I think coming back to the final point we were talking about, which was about money and marriage. So I think I'm with you. You're a bit more of a hippie dreamer type, kumbaya, let's see what happens. But no, I as I said, I genuinely respect that, and I think it's. Sometimes it's easier in life to have that mentality. For others who are like really struggling, for example, it can be like really difficult to let go and essentially submit to like Allah's will and be like, okay, whatever happens is for the best. But I think often when you experience some form of adversity and you go through something and you see that you come out on the other end okay, you with reflection you can realize, and as you said earlier, it needs that time to think about the fact that actually, you need to reflect and think that God has my back. Allah is kind of with me on this. But yeah, I think ultimately it's interesting thinking about marriage in the 21st century with Single Muslim and all these kind of online platforms. Where do you see the future?
The future is going to be more of experience, I believe, in terms of how we've been in lockdown, virtual. I think a lot of things will happen in the virtual space. I think what I'll be able to do next time we meet. Sorry, if I can just quickly cut in, has this given you, this lockdown, has it given you any further ideas for growth and expansion and things to change? Yeah, absolutely. I think the world will never be the same post-lockdown. Next time me and you will be having a virtual cup of tea, I'll actually be sat in your home, or you could be sat in my home, and we could be just here. Do you know what I mean? That's where we're going with this thing. We'll put the things on. Even we might not even be the big visors. It's going to be the the new acceptable virtual norms. And I think it's good in a way. You know, we've got to just take it as a blessing. I think Allah's given us a bit of a kickstart and a bit of a boot to the whole world to kind of like embrace this virtual space. And everybody knows about Zoom now. Everybody, even if you didn't want to know about Zoom.
Zoom is my new best friend. I had no clue what Zoom was. I'm close to getting a premium account just for the sake of it. I love Zoom. But it's crazy, and I think like it's as I said, like even just having this conversation, and when this topic first came up and we first discussed it offline, the fact that your numbers have jumped so significantly, and that people are kind of looking in this way, it's interesting that slowly we're starting to see the impact it's having on people's minds, and the fact that people are thinking about so many different things. So I still believe that mental health is going to be a very genuine problem that's going to come out from coronavirus due to isolation and loneliness and everything else. But at the same time, there is a lot of positives that can come. And looking at the marriage space, for example, people are starting to consider whether they are lonely, whether they do want to start looking for a spouse and everything else. And so it's great that platforms like Single Muslim are out there to kind of be able to provide that for people, I guess. So Adeem, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. It's been really insightful getting to understand a bit of your background, but then also hearing more about everything with coronavirus and Single Muslim and where we're going. Any final thoughts from you just generally on all of this stuff?
I think final message from me in terms of, you know, or users and individuals that are thinking about it, finding marriage, and those parents and kind of loved ones that are, you know, wanting the best for them in terms of through marriage. You know, it's a very stressful and a time full of anxiety. So don't really kind of like, you know, come under all that pressure. You know, marriage is half of our faith and it's huge for us Muslims. But what we also need to know that there's a massive, massive reward in searching for something that is good. So not only is the goal, the rewards at the end, but the rewards are all the way through in terms of searching for somebody to complete our faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us all.
Well, thank you again for joining us. It's this is, I think, the first time we've partnered up with British Muslim TV and the Muslim Vibe, and I'm glad that you could kind of be a part of this experience. And I'm hoping this is the start of something else. So I guess for people listening, please do keep in touch, stay informed, and we'll be back hopefully with more great content in collaboration with British Muslim TV. Assalamu alaikum.